Barcelona news makes rival fans accidentally admit that Mikel is a good coach. This is the ArsenalVision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot. You can bot me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Yeah, so the news, it wasn't really news, as Mikel called it, fake news, but breaks that Mikel is off to Barcelona, and it leads to fans of rival clubs on social media cheering and laughing at us losing Mikel. Upon the news being rubbished, they then have to do an about face and say, well, it's not that we thought he was good. We just thought it was funny. It's not because we thought he was good. But yeah, they kind of showed their whole ass on that one. So kind of funny. Look, obviously, we got to talk about the Klopp news. It's huge news. We will, though, do the Arsenal-centric stuff and probably do it first. I don't think we'll talk about Mikel going to Barca, but maybe we'll talk about that rumor coming out and what it's going to be like in the wake of Xavi leaving Barca and how we might be impacted by that. I think there's a merry-go-round here, though. And I think it goes Xavi leaves Barca, so Pep leaves City to go to Barca. And then Company can go to City. I think Gerrard can go to Liverpool. I don't know where that leaves Klopp going. Xabi Alonso can go to Real Madrid. That's fine. But I see this merry-go-round playing out in a positive way if we just will it into existence. We'll talk some team news. It is the rare occasion that I believe, and I don't want to jinx it, we are recording the pod at the perfect time. The presser's been done. We know the team news. The Barca links have been rubbished, even though we know they were always rubbish. So we're in a pretty good spot here, I think. We will, of course, have an instant reaction to tomorrow's game. But as far as the schedule for this week, the post-match pod will come out on Thursday at its regular time. So if you want to catch the instant reaction, that'll be out tomorrow. And I think we're going to live stream it since the game is an evening game. And that way, if you want to catch it like right at full time, it'll be live streamed. You can watch it live in real time, but it'll also be out recorded. Clive has finally been talked into the idea of doing the director of football episode that he didn't want to do after listening to Phil's and saying that it riled him up and he's ready to go. So we're going to keep doing the director of football episodes because those have been one of the more fun and popular things we've done in a while. Not much else to tell you right now. So all I will tell you is that you can now be listening to Clive, who is on Twitter at ClivePFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello. And can I just say, it wasn't Phil that riled me up, it was you. So I can't wait to see you.
I've heard both sides of that story. And Tim is on Twitter at Stillminator. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
I think honestly, like it's such a dead site. I might just drop he's on Twitter at and just say, here's Clive and here's Tim. Because like at this point, I don't know. I just don't know. So let's do the Arsenal stuff first. We'll do the Klopp stuff, of course, because I think it is really, really big, and I want to talk about what it means. There is a pod over on Patreon dedicated to it right when the news broke, if you want to hear that, but we'll get more erudite thoughts on it from Tim and Clive today. But let's start with the Mikel thing. And I don't know, Tim, like I never believed that he was going to go to Barca. I never thought that news was true. It was rubbished pretty quickly after it came out, and Mikel has now today fully rubbished it and said it really hurt him, really upset him. And I can understand why, because it can destabilize a dressing room that I think is pretty tranquil and together. But I think the bigger point is, for me, we have a manager who is ascending in the game, and he is going to get linked with big jobs when they open. It doesn't mean those links will be real, and it doesn't mean he wants to go. The Barca thing is just going to be a drumbeat now, in my view. Even though he's rubbished it, I still think it'll be a drumbeat. I still think you'll have, Catalonian press just wanting to stir the pot and say, despite his public comments, Mikel is interested in the Barca job, or, whatever friends claim it is intriguing to him. Do you think this puts pressure on the club to just get an extension announced and out? Do you think there's maybe an angle where Mikel secretly thinks this is great news in a way because it just makes it that much easier for him to have a little leverage to get it done at a number that suits him? I mean, is there a potential for this to be an annoyance, even though I think all of us know there's not much chance he's taking this job?
Okay, jinx alert. I'm not remotely worried about him going to Barcelona at this stage, for the simple fact that I always think people are kind of slow to catch up with what's actually happening now, today in football. It's not 2011. Barcelona. This is not Messi's Barcelona managed by Pep. This is a husk of a Barcelona team.
Oh, come on, Tim. They could sell a few more stands or a few more pieces of the pitch and get Mikel, right? Pull a lever.
I'm not saying they're a terrible team. Obviously they're not. But have you looked at their playing squad? It's not Xavi, Iniesta. It's not even Rakitic, Fabregas, Sanchez. Like some of the guys that big clubs picked up because they didn't want them anymore. Like, they don't even have that anymore. Really. They don't have a lot of players I'd take anymore, to be quite frank. And if you look at the class of player they're really going for, like, this is a different time. And so I would be much more worried about, and also, like, we know what the Catalan press is like. Like why on earth would you trust those guys? Like, it's a nakedly propaganda operation. What I would worry more about, Elliot, is that the Liverpool job's coming up and maybe the Manchester United job will come up when Sir Jim Ratcliffe does his little rounds. And, like, there are big jobs coming up, and we don't know how much longer Chelsea will stay with Mauricio Pochettino, for example. Like, the Premier League at the moment is just absolute, like, centre of the universe for both managerial jobs and playing gigs. And I don't even think Barcelona can compete with that anymore. Even, like, Bayern Munich bought Eric Dyer. Bayern Munich tried to buy Joao Paulinho, who's a good player, but this is not the class of player that they were trying to pick up from the Premier League even 5 years ago. Like, it really is the land of milk and honey. So for me, if I were Mikel's agent, I'd probably be looking at Liverpool and saying, that job's coming up. Who knows if they'd be interested or not? I don't know. If I were a Liverpool fan and I thought I could get it done, I'd be interested in that if I put my kind of Liverpool hat on. So that's what I would be more worried about. I'm not worried at the moment. Football's fluid. It can change. Things can change very quickly, as they have for Barcelona. But at the moment, that I don't really worry about any job outside the Premier League. It's much more inside the Premier League that I would be slightly anxious about. And if I were Mikel's people, that's where I'd be leveraging at the moment.
Yeah, we're in a unique position to keep Mikel, even if he wanted to leave, in the sense that we're in a time where the Premier League is in the ascendancy, not just in terms of popularity, but in terms of financial might. We are in a period where I think if Pep were to leave City, which is probably the Premier League job that might interest him for reasons that are maybe putting 2 and 2 together and getting 22, like, maybe I'm oversimplifying that, but it seems that way. There'd still be the cloud hanging over them of possible punishment for their many, 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 many financial improprieties and corruption. So I think it would be a dangerous job to take, right? For that reason. Klopp leaving now means that even if the Liverpool job is attractive, it will be filled, I think, sooner than the cycle of where Mikel would even remotely look to do that. And so I think it's just perfect timing. You have the financial might concentrated in the Premier League. You have no other job that I think looks appealing. Mikel has actually, ironically, turned Arsenal into probably the most appealing job right now. So kudos to him for that. And Clive, I think it is. I was going to say it's unfortunate what's happened to Barcelona, but I really don't find it to be unfortunate. That's a club that I can kind of enjoy their demise, I must admit, with everything we've been through with them. But yeah, it's not the attractive job that it once might have been. So I think everyone presumes Mikel will be extended, but do you have any concern at all about distraction creeping in as the drumbeat of this bangs on, and that getting an extension announced just creates the elimination of any possible a drumbeat that might be a distraction for the team?
Yeah, if you put yourself in Mikel's position, right? So the whole club have just been out to Dubai and no doubt shared some magical moments together as a group and as a family and with their families, and basically restated their commitment to each other and worked out what they want to do, realigned their goals, what they want to achieve. And what then happens? When he comes back, within a week or so, someone links him with another job. And I bet that's, to him, that's the complete opposite to what he was, talking about. He was talking about how committed he would be. Can you imagine what it's like when you go away on a group trip? You do, you share things with people, and so I think I must have disappointed him. And you look at Barcelona, I don't think the team's covered it, right? They're in a different place. The whole league is, to be honest.
Yeah,
they're a different place. I see Barcelona played a 16-year-old centre back the other day. They've also got a 16, 17-year-old winger, and you think Yamal, who plays he's like a Rafinha clone type thing from the right hand side. They've got Balde, a left back. I don't think he's more than 18. They just brought a Brazilian kid, Vitor Roque, in, who's like 18 or so. I may get his numbers slightly wrong, but the point I'm trying to make is there is a push to go extremely young. So they are a project on the football side of things. They're rebuilding the stadium. They've got the referee discussion going on in the background around bribery, and they've mortgaged their future. I mean, mate, it's not exactly sitting there as a blue chip job, is it? You know, and so I wouldn't be running to that project, and just because I speak the same language, right? So it's very very poor journalism, shall we say? And we shouldn't spend too much time talking about it. But wait, I think your earlier point, Elliot, about what it uncovered in us as Arsenal people and other fans. Maybe just slap man the chops to say, yeah, we might not like some of your substitutions, Mikel. You need to get him on 3 minutes earlier. And at Smith Rowe, you need to get him on. You know what I mean? And these are really small details compared to what, how he's transformed the club along with other people and the level that we now discuss and issues we discuss. They're first world problems, aren't they, compared to what Barcelona are having to face?
Yeah. So I think it's weird. I feel like we should be talking about this more, but it would be doing it for the sake of creating content, not because there's any there. I do think sometimes a link like this gives you, as you said, Clive, an opportunity to reconsider your perceptions of the manager. But I've also started to appreciate that social media in general is totally broken. And I am someone who has, and I think a lot of us who are in my position, who are not close to the club geographically, wind up in a situation where their perceptions of what fans think and what's happening at the club is shaped by social media. If you get to go to the ground regularly, that's a privileged position, and you get to engage with people in person. Even if you're in a place where there's a local that gets filled up with fans and you can go and be around them, again, that's a privileged position. But for the rest of the people listening, the rest of the people that love Arsenal, your connection to the club is either through the content you consume or social media. And that can really distort your perception of things because social media algorithms are going to amplify the most extreme views. It is only on social media that I come in contact with people who literally will say, Mikel's a clown. He can't get out of our club fast enough. He's destroyed our club. I mean, you will come in contact with that. I'm not going to name check any people, but there are people that have cultivated pretty large followings and pretty large groups, almost like the word cult is not what I mean, but you get the idea, around hating Mikel Arteta. Social media loves that because the algorithm really gets fed by the extremes. And by the way, I will confess, there is the opposite on social media as well, of course. The people who will shout down any critique of the manager. That's just how social media works. But I admit that it seeps into my analysis at times because I am exposed to it. And I have to take a step back and take a breath and realize that that's just not a reflection of the general, I think, thoughtful population of Arsenal fans and the way they think about things. I think overwhelmingly the perception is Mikel is an excellent up-and-coming manager who, while he may have things to work on in his management, is taking us in a good direction. And so overall, I think this has given me a moment to maybe step back out of the fog of immediate reaction and the intensity of elation and frustration around the results and think about what I believe about the manager, which is, I don't know there's anyone else out there I'd want. I think we have the guy that I want us to have. And that doesn't mean he's perfect, but it means I really like where we're headed. And so maybe the best thing that came out of this, at least for me personally, because obviously the most important thing is what I think personally, is to just stop and reevaluate and say, outside of the immediacy, how do I feel about things? And I think I feel really good about things. And Tim, that's sort of where I want to wrap this conversation, but I just want to finish up with you on that, which is, I think I have a renewed appreciation for just how laser focused we can be on the day-to-day, result to result, transfer rumor to rumor, and judge everything by what's happening in the moment. And I'm wondering if something like this gives you a chance to just pause, stop, zoom out, and think, how would I feel if he left? Would I want someone else? How upset would it be? How damaging would it be to the club? I think it allowed me to put a little perspective around it for myself. Because when you do dive into social media, you wind up really in some, I think, extremely polarized conversations at times. So I think for me, this was a nice little break for perspective.
Yeah. I think I'm sounding like I'm giving myself massive credit here. I think I've kind of always had that, because I always have that like duality in my mind. And the one and only reason I didn't go like full Mikel Arteta out in that very, very troubled period in like the winter of 2020 was because I just sat there and thought to myself, who do we get? Like the man, and it brings home to me. And look, I kind of think we're due, after misfiring with Emery and the last years of Wenger and everything. But actually, how hard it is to get a good manager at the moment, I think the demand massively outstrips the supply. And there are a lot of clubs out there who be looking at us a little bit enviously, like Man United, one of them. Like, they just can't get that appointment right. And some of that's because they're stupid, but some of them it's because it's really hard. And I'm looking at, below us, like Crystal Palace at the moment. Like, Palace are just stuck in this like ennui of getting Hodgson back and finishing 14th. But then how do you go to the next level and they get Vieira, and it does, like it's really hard to do that. And so I just stepped back from that brink because I just couldn't see who else was out there. And now it's like, what on earth would we do? And it's not just the kind of Barcelona. Like, look, the Barcelona link, like getting offered the Barca gig now is like being offered CEO of Enron in about 1999 or 2000. Like that's not a gig you want right now. But
No.
I'm looking around at the moment because these things are so cyclical, and I can see like, who on earth are Liverpool going to get to replace Klopp? That is such a big appointment, and I kind of have a theory that the guy after the guy is doomed to fail, almost irrespective. Like I quite strongly believe that. I just can't see many examples in elite football of the guy after the guy being anything other than a failure. I almost think it's impossible. And then I look, covering the women's game as well. Chelsea have got the same thing with Emma Hayes. And in women's football at the moment, it's kicked off this big cycle of coaches everywhere signing new contracts. Like England just got Serena Wiegman to a new contract. They didn't need to do that. She's not near the end. But, you can bet her agent was going, there's another big job on the market here. Fancy giving us a pay rise, do you? And like, it's kicked off this cycle of loads of big coaches signing new contracts, and it's because clearly, and they're entitled to do this, like just using it as a, well, that job's coming up, I'll get an interview for it. Do you fancy like giving my pay packet a bit of a bump? So when you see some of these teams who are struggling and who are probably about to struggle to find managers, I think you realize that we don't have a perfect manager. Of course we don't. No one does. But like, we're in a pretty good spot as far as that's concerned. That is, whatever issues we have, that's probably the least of them at the moment. What's, maybe, I don't know how much of an issue it is. We're going to change CEO, and we got some changes behind the scenes, albeit we're keeping some continuity there, but we don't know how that's going to shake out yet. I even I was thinking the other day about the idea of getting Mislintat and Sanyehi in 2018 on paper. Brilliant idea to get the data guy who can unearth gems, and then get the guy with the contacts book and get them together. Like, on paper, that is a fantastic idea. It didn't work because they clashed with each other and there was a power struggle.
And
But
they both might be corrupt charlatans, but your mileage may vary.
Well, yeah, of course, which
maybe, I don't know.
maybe wasn't apparent at the time. Maybe it was, I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like, on paper, you can fully appreciate why Arsenal made that decision at the time. Didn't work because it's hard. It's really hard. And I do think if you've got something good, you should probably stick with it.
Yeah, and to your point, the guy after the guy failed at Arsenal. The guy after the guy may fail at Liverpool. In the case of Manchester United, the guy after 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 the guy failed, and sort of the guy after the guy after the guy after the guy, he failed too. Clive, one thing that I think we can finish on this, because I do want to spend some time on the Klopp thing, and we need to do team news, Forest preview. We got a lot to do. Had the club announced a Mikel extension a week ago, for example, well, I think it largely would have been met with a shrug, like, yep, that's good. He needed one. Takes that issue off the table. Good job. Well done. There would have certainly been, I think, some reaction of what has he done to deserve it? Are we doing this too early? Shouldn't we see how the season wraps up? Do you think maybe this news breaking just eliminates any hesitation or any reaction around him getting an extension, because it comes now under the cover of, hey, if we don't get this done, he's just going to continue to be linked to big jobs when they open up. Like, I think it makes it seem that much more prudent. And I already think it was prudent, given that we don't want the manager's contract to ever be an issue that makes it hard to recruit or makes it hard to re-sign players. So do you think that this just makes it even that much easier for the club to go ahead and do what's needed, get an extension done and announce it?
I sort of don't look at it in the same dramatic way. I just don't think it like that. I think when you're in a people organisation like a football club, it's always about how you operate with the people inside, at all ages, all different levels. And it's quite clear to me that he's developed a way of working that people in the club like from top to bottom. So when people say things like we lose a couple of games, we're not sure about a manager, I just have to keep my mouth shut, because it's not only about that. Obviously, if you lose 10 games in a row, you've obviously lost something with the people. So what you should look for is always the relationships. Do you see the same strong relationships? And as Tim was saying earlier on about potentially Arteta being looked at by other clubs enviously, yeah, not just Arteta, Edu as well, who's built a reputation. And we have two young people just on the start of their careers that work in tandem that many clubs would like. Many clubs would like. Manchester United would take them tomorrow. You know, they honestly they would. And they're looking at other directors of football from other clubs in the Premier League. There isn't a big pool. I've been spending some time in the recent couple of weeks while we've been off, because we've played twice in January, I believe, looking at other managers, right? There's a couple of young, bright English managers down in the Championship, in Russell Martin and Enzo Maresca, who's at Leicester. And there's obviously Areola, you know, at Bournemouth, who's quite good. Steve Cooper's had a bit of a rough kicking by Notts Forest, but I think he'll come back. So there is a layer of managers that are out there. Graham Potter's out there, starting to get his head up again from no doubt his holidays in Mauritius on Chelsea's money. He's starting to get himself back up
Frank,
again.
Clive.
Thomas
I
Frank.
think Thomas Frank would be on some short lists.
Absolutely, because of the way he operates, the way he manages, the way uses modern data. He is a very good manager. You know, it's a great shout to him. And I think Manchester United are thinking about him. Right, so we have a view of what a good manager is, and I'm quite glad we're moving away in our minds away from the Contes and the Mourinhos, because that doesn't work anymore. You can't torch clubs to its core and walk away with a big payoff, or take them to court if you don't get your payoff. That isn't going to work anymore. You need people that can connect inside the club and outside the club. Also connect to the players. The players need to understand the coaches. They want modern coaches, want modern techniques. They don't want yesteryear. And so we have that. I mean, look at one of our assistant coaches. I'm not sure he's even 30 yet in Carlos Cuesta. He might be 29, 30. I mean, gee whiz. I don't want to tell you what I was doing at 29, 30, but there's a place called Iron Napa was in it. I know I was doing a lot of that. So it's incredible what these guys are doing at a younger age, right? So I think we're very fortunate that we're building something. Some people say, "Oh, it's taking too long to build," and I get really frustrated by that. Okay, you can't have everybody think like you think. But if you look at the 4 years Arteta's been here and the COVID impact to those 4 years, the impact to the market, which would have slowed the transfer market, not just for him but for others. And then you look at where we are right now, when the transfer market's completely frozen due to PSR. You just think to yourself, crikey, mate, you haven't had all the luck of the days when Abramovich was throwing monies around on Shevchenko, etc., and Crespo and all. And Man City bought like 2 or 4 fullbacks in the summer, 50 million quid each, wherever it was. He hasn't had that, which no one was looking. Right? Newcastle must be frustrated as hell. The richest club in the world, they can't spend anything. So yeah, it's just an interesting times. But this manager's learning very, very quickly, and I don't think there's an inch of doubt that he's not going to get a new contract.
And can
I
I
think that's
just,
Mhm.
sorry, I just wanted to add over the top of that. You talked about the transfer market being frozen. I actually kind of think that works in Arteta's favour because it means coaching means more at the moment. And I think that's why Liverpool have come back around. Like Chelsea have thrown loads of money at things, United have thrown loads of money at things. And it just hasn't worked. Whereas Klopp
Mm.
and Arteta, elite coaches with slightly fewer resources than those clubs, it's really worked. And so I do think that actually works in his favour that perhaps the transfer market, albeit he spent a lot of money, but the transfer market perhaps is a little bit slow.
Yeah, I
Mm.
think Tim.
Before we do the
I think you're right. I think you're right. But what I want to say on top of that is, people have their own measures, and they look at the top line numbers. You spent nearly 200 million last year. Why are you in the league? You know, and the fact we've got injuries and gaps in the squad still, we're still at a phase of the project that we're not quite complete on depth wise of things. But no one cares. I've got my measure. I want my winnings. I want to win. I want to win. No one cares. No one's measuring in that way. You know, and I think you're bang on about this. Coaching is gonna be, it's gonna be it. It's gonna be it because people will not be able to spend. That's what's gonna drive it. I mean, I'm all for it. I don't want to see people like, was it Siggy Gid, the guy who went to Everton from Tottenham for like 50 million quid. I can't remember his name now. But yeah,
Sigurdsson.
thank you. Those sort of buys are just stupid buys. What are we doing? What are we doing? What as clubs? What are we doing to each other? It needs to stop. So maybe a bit of sanity is no bad thing. And we'll just get back to the core of the game, which is making people better.
That is an important part of it for sure. That should just about do it for the non-issue Mikel links to Barca that we're not really going to talk about today. So if you wanted us to talk about it, I'm sorry we disappointed you. We're just not going to. You can't make us. Okay. 27 minutes on the nose. Okay. Tim, team news and Forest preview before we do the Klopp stuff. Partey not in the squad. Maybe for Liverpool, maybe not. Mikel's comment on that was sort of like, he could be, but if he's not, it's no problem. Fair enough. The news on Rice sounds encouraging. The news on Gabriel sounds encouraging, but not definitive. Late fitness tests for both of them ahead of Forest is the news that I'm hearing. I say I'm hearing it. It's literally the news. Everybody's hearing it. It was in the press conference. Thoughts on this Forest game? I mean, obviously, with Liverpool on the horizon, you don't need me to say it. This is what a trap game is. This is exactly what it looks like, smells like, shaped like. We've got Liverpool coming to the Emirates in what feels like a season-defining game on Sunday, and we've got Forest tomorrow, and maybe, just maybe, the slightest fitness concerns on players that you might be inclined to say, I'll just not risk them, except Forest away is not an easy fixture, and a fixture we have lost. So, thoughts on how he manages that? I mean, obviously, my opinion is you have to take that game the most seriously. The next game is the most important game, and failing to win it makes the game after that a lot less important. So I think it's the most important game, and you have to risk the guys if you have to risk them. But do you feel differently?
No, I think that's about right. This isn't a ground where we haven't got a right to swagger into, really.
No.
Quite frankly. So, in fact, we've got a point to prove. I think the other thing is, and of course, this is where it really does depend on the fitness of both players. We know what Forest do. They hit you on the break. They've got some really speedy forwards. It's exactly how they got us last year on the break. And we need recovery pace. And for me, the two biggest exponents of recovery pace in our team are probably Gabriel and Declan Rice. So those are, as long as they're fit, those are players you probably want. When we have to chase backwards, because we will have to chase backwards at some point in this game. Hopefully not too often, but yeah, I just think also these are, for want of a better phrase, away game guys in Declan Rice and Gabriel. Like, maybe if it was Zinchenko who had a question mark, maybe you'd question that. If it was Havertz or someone like that, you might go, yeah, actually. But Declan Rice and Gabriel, those are our away at Nottingham Forest on a Tuesday night, guys. So if they're fit, I think they should play. On the Partey stuff, I'd say that if he's not if he's not in the squad for this, he clearly can't start against Liverpool. So the most we'd get is him being on the bench against Liverpool. Whereas if you're looking for him to start that game, I think he'd have to be involved in this game from the bench. So I think that really rules out him really having much of an impact in the Liverpool game at all.
Clive, you feel similarly?
Yeah, it just makes sense, right? And my hopes are not in Thomas Partey yet. It's still January, and we got a way to go to the crunch time of the season. So let's see what happens. In the next couple of weeks. I was hoping he would be sort of on the bench by the weekend minimum. But if that doesn't look like it's going to happen, then we'll see. We'll soon see. With the Forest game in my head from the home game, they were quite sharp on the transition. You always remember the bits that scare you, right? So they got Ilanga. I think he had 2 breaks down left hand side. I think we played Partey at right back, and we were keying on that area, weren't we? We were looking at that area. So every time there was a run down the right hand side, we were talking about it on podcasts because we didn't like the fact that Gabriel wasn't playing, and we weren't sure why he wasn't playing. And this is going to work. So we really focused on the left hand side, right? And Anchor, he's very, very quick. He's very, very quick. And they got other players in their team that are quite nice. And the one I like is Gibbs White. You heard me say it before, the Gibbs White and Emma Smith-Rowe was in the England under-17 team that won the World Cup, and those careers, along with Conor Gallagher, 3 careers that it's quite interesting to see how they peak and trough. Gibbs White had a struggle to get into the Wolves team. They made a chunk of change out of him, which now looks really good on the books. Wolves, shall we say? Now we know what it does as a homegrown player leaving. And then you have a situation with, obviously, Gallagher he went on the loan circuit for a while, went to Paris, did really, really well, come back into Chelsea, and he's got himself to a point where he's actually been captain on occasion. So the whole atmosphere and the whole culture of Chelsea's changed, and he's still there, but looking with a big price in his head to go other places to allow Chelsea to probably take a Victor Osimhen into their club. Right? And so suddenly you're looking at a homegrown player being used in a slightly different way. And Smith-Rowe, we know he was one that maybe didn't get in the under-17 team, was off the bench, and then he came through very, very quickly, but also suffered with injury. So watching their careers go up and down is an interesting one. But yeah, I think Forest is one of those games that we really don't do so well in. You just turn up. And I don't know if Tim has been to that ground. I'm sure he has. But when you turn up there, you just get a bad feeling. You just get a feeling. And you just get a feeling. I can't describe it to you. Yeah, I can't describe it to you when you go away. I don't know as many as Tim, obviously, but I've been to most of the ground. You just walk in and you just feel it. It's one of those, if we get out of Dodge here with anything, it doesn't sit right on the table, but if we get out of Dodge with anything, I'll be over the moon. Other places you can go, you're playing crap. You think we're winning today. Because it's just got a feeling around it. It doesn't sound like good podcast analysis, but those who go, exactly what I mean, right? So I just want to get a good feeling out of this game against Forest, and I haven't got one yet. I'm waiting for a whistle to go.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, we know we didn't play well in the home game. You pointed out some of the reasons why. That was when we were talking about Arsenal having clicked. To be fair, we're still kind of talking about Arsenal having clicked. That's kind of become part of the season angst. But then you kind of look at them on the table, precariously perched 16th, just 3 points above Everton, who, obviously would be above them if it weren't for the points deduction. They're staring a potential points deduction in the face. They're 4 points clear of Luton. They have a minus 12 goal difference. They're a little better if you like the XG thing. If you look at the home and away split, they picked up 12 points at home, 3 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses. Their last 2 games before this Brentford game that they just lost, though, they beat United and Newcastle. United at home, Newcastle away. The thing about them is they're just not going to have a lot of the ball. In our first game against them, they had 22% possession, but kept it pretty tight. It's one of the few games this season we actually lost on XG, despite winning the game. And Chris Wood with 8 goals is obviously, a guy having a good season who's going to cause problems. I think the first question that has to be asked, Tim, is just, what Mikel wants to do on that left-hand side. Trossard obviously scored an important goal in our last game. He I'm going to stop short of saying is playing well, but has asserted himself as a guy who Mikel trusts. I think the reason Martinelli didn't start the last game, though, was fitness. We kind of found out about that after the game, but obviously did really well coming in off the bench. Having said that, I think in an away game where maybe Forrest comes at us a little more. I mean, even then, I don't think they'll have a lot of the ball, but Martinelli's pace to turn them around and counter on them, I think is good. His defensive support for Zinchenko is really important. I still think Martinelli will start. I assume it will be Odegaard, Havertz, Martinelli, Jesus, and Saka. I think that is, when fully fit, the selection of choice. Do you agree? I mean, do you think that's how he'll go up front?
Yeah, I do. I think Trossard, this was one of the... Martinelli missed the last 2 games of last season. I think those are the only games he missed, and this was one of them when he got that ankle injury at Brighton. And Trossard played on the left in this game. And look, there was a lot more in that overall performance as well. I think Kivior was at left back that day, Partey at right back. Arsenal were done at that point, but Trossard just didn't stretch them in the way that I think you really want to stretch Forest. And if you look at the way we score our goals against Forest at home, the first goal is Saka crashing in off the right hand side and whacking one in the far corner, and the second goal is Martinelli beating 2 players with the double drag back, getting the ball to Nketiah. And yeah, I expect to see Martinelli start in this game, not least because he didn't start the last one as well. Look, maybe there's I do think not even we as fans, actually, maybe even Arteta got to get comfortable with just rotating that front line a little bit more. Left wing is not the only place Trossard can play. There may be a place for him to play false 9 in this game. I think he's generally pretty good there. Jesus offers a lot, but not really goals at the moment. I think Trossard's probably more likely to supply that at the moment. So maybe there's a call for playing Trossard's false 9, give Gabriel Jesus a little rest, keep them guessing a little bit, maybe try to establish a bit more of that relationship between Trossard and Havertz as well, where you've kind of got one false 9ing, one left 8ing, and maybe some rotation of positions there. So, there's potential to do something else there, but pretty largely I am expecting the team, as it were. And you kind of know what I mean by that.
Yep.
And I do think that for our development in the second half of the season, the team is going to have to become a much more fluid concept. And some, getting Vieira back, getting Partey back will undoubtedly help in that. But at the moment, it feels like we've got a pretty definite team. And I think that's not necessarily that healthy at the moment.
Well, interesting. If Gabriel can't go, it'll be Kivior. I don't think there's any question about that. So I think that's pretty straightforward. If Rice can't go, then I think it gets a little bit interesting. I assume it would be Jorginho. I just wonder, though, if then he'd want to go with Kai and Odegaard, or if he'd want to try something that gives Jorginho a little more support. Although I confess I don't know who that would be, because El Neni won't be back from Egypt yet. They crashed out, so expect to see Mohamed Salah make a rapid and unexpected recovery from his injury in time for the weekend. I don't know that there's anyone we really could use to support Jorginho in that case, but let's just play the thought experiment, Clive. If there is no Declan Rice, let's say the manager just wants to be extra careful to have him for the weekend, a dangerous risk to take, but let's say he takes it. Is it just Jorginho for Rice and that's it? Or is there a way you think he might try to support Jorginho with another change as well?
Now, one thing we do know about Mikel, to his fault, he has a hierarchy in the dressing room around selection, and Jorginho will play. I don't generally like the Jorginho Zinchenko base, because Zinchenko will play. I think they completely mirror each other. And if I was thinking about Zinchenko's future in this squad, I would try to be saying to him, I think we're going to make you into the next Jorginho, as a true rat-a-tat 6 that moves the ball around and just pops it, and does minimal defending, but make sure you're a good pivot. That's how I'd look after the next phase of his career. So 2 of them together can work, but it's possession game, right? And it's against Forest, who are not a possession team, they're a transition team. Those 2 are not transition defenders or midfielders, sorry. So that's a little bit of concern. And I have seen sort of Kai and Jorginho play Brentford in the League Cup game, where I felt they played more as a double pivot in that game, and I've seen that sort of work okay. So I'm not worried any longer. I think how we use our defenders into midfield is how we bolster midfield. So it's more or less, it's making me think about what a midfielder truly is going into next season when we're in the transfer market, etc. So yeah, there's no other options, Elliot. Hence, if we are going to go into the market, I think a versatile fullback is what I'd be thinking about, because I think it unlocks a lot in the squad, positionally, to cover areas of weakness. So that is the only thing I'd expect to see before the end of the window. But otherwise, I don't expect to see anything.
Yeah. One last thing that I would consider. I think I'm probably overthinking this. I loved what I saw from Jorginho when he came on against Palace. But I am cognizant of the fact that the game was totally over when he came on. And Palace were dead, and they'd kind of quit, and they had brought on, as Clive pointed out, guys that can't run anymore. I think Tompkins was not, it just wasn't, it was set up for Jorginho to succeed. But I still think the way he breaks lines and the way he progresses the ball is maybe even a little bit better than what Rice does. And I think that a Jorginho, Odegaard, Rice 3 for this game could work really well. With Rice playing more of the Kai role. We haven't seen Rice have the chance to get closer to goal too many times this season, but I think he can be pretty devastating in that pocket of space. And certainly, while it may not be the way you think of him traditionally, Kai isn't giving us so much in attack that you worry you're going to lose some dynamic, goal-scoring maven. I don't know, Tim. I think that there is an argument in a game like this where we're going to have a lot of the ball for Jorginho to be the deepest midfielder, as long as Rice is there, because we know he can just chew up the ground and get back to help out and really have that ball progression. That, while I confess, I agree with Clive that a Zinchenko and Jorginho combination has vulnerability. I think as long as Rice is on the pitch, you're still okay. And then you have so much ball progression, final third entry, and line-breaking pass capability that I think you have a better ability to turn defending into attacking quickly and hurt Forest, which we weren't very good at doing in the first game. So is that galaxy braining it? Am I overthinking it?
No. I wouldn't complain if I saw that. I agree with Clive that I don't necessarily like Jorginho and Zinchenko, but I think if you have Rice in there as well, that offsets a bit of it, particularly if he operates in that left channel. I do think with Jorginho, my mind goes to a couple of things. First of all, I think we've always done this as fans. Like, quite often, the guy at the base of your midfield is quite slow. Like, the ones that tend to be quick tend to be your Flamini types, but Xabi Alonso wasn't quick, Pirlo wasn't quick, Makelele wasn't even that quick. You look at a lot of these players, particularly deep lying playmakers. Arteta wasn't quick, and I think pace is something that we really index as fans, and so when someone doesn't have it, we're like, oh God, we've got to protect them. But actually, I don't necessarily always think you do. I honestly, I don't often watch us with Jorginho in the team and think, oh my God, he got murdered for pace loads of times today, because I think his positional sense is good. But also my mind goes back to one of his better performances for Arsenal at that time at Newcastle. And it surprised everyone because Newcastle were this front-footed, pressy, transitional team, and Arteta dropped Jorginho in. He got player of the match, and he said afterwards, we didn't want to directly compete with them on that. We wanted to keep the ball. We wanted to keep it away from them. That's one of the things that Jorginho gives you, because his passing is good. You're in fewer transitional moments anyway, so I wouldn't worry about him at the base. It's the combination of him and Zinchenko, like with Havertz ahead of them. I think particularly against a team like Forest, with the way they break down the wings, that would make us a bit too vulnerable. But I think if you throw Rice into that equation, I kind of think that's fine, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. I'm ready to move on unless you want to have a final comment on that, Clive, in terms of the Jorginho Rice combo.
No, it's just interesting to see how the brains are working. And Tim was talking about lack of pace there. I think it's more potentially we fear the defensive transition, and our ability to cover it. And That's what I fear with those two. But I immediately forget they're both going to have 100 touches and we're going to keep the ball for 88 minutes. You forget that bit. You just bring your deepest fears into it, and the two attacks they're going to have, can they manage it? And that's what you do. But if we manage our attacks, maybe we've got to flip our brains. If we manage our attacks, then none of this will matter. And we've got to get back to doing that, I think, and let the scoreboard show what the data is telling us, Elliot.
I look forward to another 5-0, 3 from corners, 2 from penalties, and a huge complaint that we don't score from open play going into the Liverpool game. We will heavily discuss the Liverpool game at the tail end of the week. I think it's too early to do it now. We play tomorrow, so as I mentioned, we'll have an instant reaction to this game after that. We'll do a director of football episode with Clive, and we'll do the main pod, which will preview Liverpool. We're going to have live streams around the Liverpool game. We have very, very special stuff happening in Salt Lake City for the Liverpool game, and I'm still trying to confirm all the details around that, and we'll get them out to you as soon as I have them. So let's shift gears to the news that really occupied the entire sports world over the weekend, which is that Klopp is leaving Liverpool. But before we do that, let me tell you that this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp isn't online therapy. It's just therapy. I cannot say this enough. Just do therapy. Even if it's not with BetterHelp, just do it. But I think the reason BetterHelp is such a great option is that you don't have to get in the car. You don't have to leave the house. You don't have to budget that extra time. It is more affordable. You can find someone that you connect with that works for you, because depending on where you're living, there may not be a specialist in your area, or you may only have the choice of a couple of therapists that are convenient, that are less than a 30-minute drive, or, that take the insurance you have if that's a consideration, or that are affordable. And then maybe you don't connect with them. With BetterHelp, you can find a therapist that works with you well. If you need a specialist, you can find that. You can do it camera on or camera off. So if therapy is saying you want to sort of dip a toe in and you're like, you know what, I feel a little better with camera off to start, or altogether, you can do that. So, I think understanding that so much of life is about getting yourself into a healthy mental state, and understanding how much harder that has gotten with social media, with all the things we're inundated with all of the ways that news comes into our life and affects our mindset, not just all the usual things that happen in familial relationships and friendship relationships, romantic relationships and professional relationships. Therapy is a way to stay on track. And so I think it's something to do. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Become your own, be what's the word I'm looking for here? This is one of my best ad reads ever. I guess become the master of your destiny in terms of where you're headed psychologically. Visit betterhelp.com/vision today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/vision. Do it now, Clive. Is that enough of that?
Indeed.
I'm going to need to get one of those supplements to advertise on the pod for brain health, apparently. Really crazy, by the way. I've been affected by a little bit of a cold, and it's nothing bad. I feel fine, but terrible vertigo. You ever had that? That was new for me. If you don't know what that is, it's when like everything feels like it's kind of spinning and twisting, kind of like you're on a ship, a boat. And so the world is just rocking and twisting. It's like really, really disconcerting.
I've had that. I had that when I left to Tollington after Bournemouth last year. I was spinning,
yes.
and I couldn't get to the train station, and it took about 4 hours to get home. Apart from that, it's very similar. Very similar.
I don't think that's vertigo, though. I think I can diagnose that slightly differently, and I can guess that you probably did not feel great the next day either. Also, not vertigo. Speaking of 2-day hangovers, I hope you're feeling better, Marcus Rashford. An interesting story there. If you haven't heard it, you should go check it out, because things are going great at Manchester United. Really, really, really great. Played a full strength lineup against mid-table League 2 opposition in the FA Cup, and at one point we're pegged back to 2-2. It's going great there, and I love it. Okay, Jurgen Klopp is leaving Liverpool at the end of the season. Let's do this from the Arsenal viewpoint first. Tim, is Jurgen Klopp leaving at the end of this season? You have to flip the coin and decide which side of this you're on. Is it the extra 5% motivation that's going to push them over the edge? Or is it potentially a distraction where players start considering their future? I saw today already quotes from Van Dijk. He was asked, has this made you think about your future? And he's like, yes, I don't know if I'll continue here. This is going to be a lot of change. Everybody's leaving. All the people behind the scenes are leaving. So extra 5% or potential distraction? Which way do you have it?
Because it really could be either, and I've seen both. In fact, United had both, because I think, was it 2002? Ferguson said he was retiring, and then they didn't win the league, and he decided he wasn't anymore. And that proved to be a distraction. But when he did go the final time, I mean, maybe it was the extra 5%. I tend to think, if I had to bet on it, because Liverpool is quite an emotional club and Klopp is an emotional manager, I kind of bet on, in the short term, it working in their favour. I do think they're going to win a trophy this season, whichever one it is, maybe more than one. In fact, I'd probably bet on them winning two. I think they'll win the Carabao Cup and the Europa League, and obviously they're in the frame for the other two as well. So I think they're set for quite a good ending with Klopp, almost regardless of whether they win the league or not. However, long term, good for us, really good for us, because obviously he's a brilliant manager. He's a legacy manager. I think they're going to really struggle to replace him, like I said earlier, almost regardless of what they do. And it might have a hint of the Fergusons in it. When Ferguson looked at Manchester United in 2013 and thought, I can't squeeze much more out of this orange, so I'm going out at the top. And I do take what Klopp said about his energy at face value, particularly because he's someone who clearly invests so much emotion in his management. But it is like, Liverpool have had a couple of those air out of the balloon seasons under him as well, and Dortmund had them, and I think he recognises that when his energy is not 100,000%, it's not that it doesn't work, but it's like a significant drop off. It's a big part of what he does and his makeup. So I kind of bet on it working in their favour, maybe in the short term, but like long term, that's one of our big competitors. As you say, their team's aging out a little bit. I don't doubt that when Klopp talks about his energy, a big part of that might be, how the hell do I replace Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk? How on earth do I do that, particularly with profit and sustainability rules and all of that? And, they've just been expanding their stadium. I don't know how much of an impact that will have on them short term financially. Like, it could be a tricky period for them. And he might quite justifiably have said, I'm not the guy for that. Just as Ferguson kind of did the same, I think, in 2013. So, yeah, in conclusion, I'd say short term may be good, but long term bad. I think undoubtedly it's going to take them some time, even if the best they can hope for is that they have a little bump, in my view.
Yeah. It's funny because my initial immediate reaction, right, is, oh gosh, now they've got that rally around Klopp thing. It's just on now. It's going to be a procession for Liverpool. And I think there will be some of that in the home fixtures. I mean, Anfield has this legendary reputation for its atmosphere, but Tim, as you've pointed out, having been there quite a bit, there's also a lot of that that's just, they sing a song at the beginning and they sing a song at the end, and what happens in between isn't always much of a legendary atmosphere, but it can be.
This will charge it.
Yeah, this will
charge it in a big way. It's just really interesting as well, Elliot, because the women's team got exactly the same thing, where Chelsea's manager is going at the end of the season and everyone's going, is this a distraction, or is this we want to win the league for Emma Hayes? And it's just very interesting that the men and the women have got the same challenge.
Yeah, so my initial instinct is it's going to make it tougher to play at Anfield. Thankfully, we don't have to do that. We already got a result there, maybe not the ultimate result, but a result there. The funny thing is, I had this Chelsea game as a hard one for Liverpool. And Nkunku is back. Chelsea are playing okay right now. They're kind of on the rise. And Liverpool have a lot of fixtures, and they're coming off playing a lot of fixtures, and they don't have Salah. But I think now the first game at Anfield, in the league, post news breaking, I think it's going to be a tricky one for them, and that could give them that extra 5%. But I do think over the course of the season, players are professionals, and it's hard for us to remember, but this is a job for them. They will be on with their agents. They'll be talking to other players on international duty. They'll be talking to national teammates. Should I go? What do you think? What's it going to be like when he's gone? I think, Clive, the easy answer is, yep, it's the extra 5% emotionally. I think the more complex answer is, there are players that are going to have their eye on their future as well now. And I don't know that that's just naturally, obviously, necessarily the best thing for Liverpool.
Yeah, when you have a manager like that, they provide like a protective state that sits over the club. And anything that goes wrong, that person is the spokesperson. He represents the club. He represents the club to the local community. So he does a lot within the community, and he's very, very people centric, and he connects with people really, really well. And you can just he's an open book, very transparent, and very human, and very likable. Right, so. I wonder how many times I was watching the coverage yesterday of the FA Cup, and I wonder how many times I was going to do a word count that the word emotion came up in everyone's commentary. Emotion, emotion, emotion. It sort of cheeses me off a little bit, right? With my Arsenal head on, right? So, and the TV seems to focus on these emotional narratives. There's one at Newcastle as well, the emotion of Newcastle and all around it. And with the rebirth of Spurs, the emotion between Ange and the fans. And I suppose I'm saying that because maybe we've lost a little bit of that this season because we haven't won every single game 5-0 because
Mikel out.
Yeah,
get him out of my club.
fair, we just rubbish, really, aren't we? So yeah, I think we talk about Van Dijk, we're talking about Mo Salah, Trent is in the final 18 months of his contract as well. I'm not saying anything's going to happen there because he seems to be the captain in the next phase of the club, but these things suddenly become, 18 months to go. 18 months ago when Klopp's there, no one gives a monkeys. That's 18 months. That's 1 year to go in the summer. Who's going to be the manager? So these things do mean something. They really do. And the goalkeeper's not getting any younger. He's still brilliant. And so these are the major pillars of the club that they're going to have to rebuild. And Klopp's not stupid, right? I just don't think he could see himself doing that again with those players not being there. It's okay moving on Mane and you bring in Nunes for 3 times the money. It's okay doing that. But now you really do need a Coutinho job to get you back to where you want to go. And is that market really
That's
there?
Salah.
Only for Salah. And is that really still there even as we speak? Right. So so a very tough job for him. Rebuilding is not easy. And we need to see what they go next. I tend to agree with what Tim said earlier on. Everyone's talking about Xabi Alonso, but if I'm Xabi Alonso, I would stay away from it until the next time. And much like when we were coming out from Wenger, the names I was talking about back then was Conte and I was okay with Emery because the next guy was always going to be the guy that's going to suffer. So I wanted to be someone I didn't like, moody. Was going to shake the club up, didn't care about anything because we needed somebody who we felt wasn't part of the board, like Wenger was. And I think whatever Liverpool do next, and I was talking to people offline, someone like Tuchel could do well at Liverpool. And you might think, what's he done at Bayern? But that's somebody that you just comes in, he's quite good, elite, but you don't have to love him. Then the next guy is the guy that you want to love, So yeah, I think it's going to cause them, it's going to make them, we'll have to watch Walk On now for every flipping week on TV, like we've never heard the song before. And all the nostalgic commentators can go back into the 70s and we're going to start seeing stuff about Ian Rush and Kay Dalglish. And I've grown up with this crap. I'm done with it. I can't wait till Sunday and hopefully we can take care of them. And then all that emotion stuff will go out the window, right? So I think it's very important we do our job against Forest and do our job on Sunday. That's where my head is at the moment, Elliot.
I just wish you'd tell me what you really feel instead of beating around the bush. Yeah, and I think the intermediate term for Liverpool is scary because the worst case scenario, I think, is happening in this respect. I do think they could potentially get a windfall for Salah from Saudi Arabia. I think it's possible. I think they could potentially get a windfall and have some money to spend and be able to reload and rebuild a bit. But they're going to be spending it with a brand new manager and a brand new director of football and an entire shakeup behind the scenes. And there's absolutely no telling whether those are the people you want spending that chunk of money. If you gave Klopp and the current regime the chance to spend the incoming money and build the next cycle and hand it over, I think you'd feel a lot more confident than having someone with no experience at Liverpool coming in. And before they even really get a chance to hit the ground, they're told, hey, we have $100 million in the kitty, go spend it. I think it's tricky. And I think they're positioned for a couple of difficult years. I mean, look, even if Klopp had stayed, Salah going is a generational ending move. Even if it does look like they have some bright young attacking players, bright prime age attacking players already lined up to do the job, I think it's going to be difficult. And Van Dijk is nearing the end. He's already thinking about his future. I think this is a really interesting one to track. I do think Klopp will get the energy out of the crowd for sure, but whether this creates some distraction towards the tail end of the season will be interesting. One thing I also think is interesting, he mentioned, let's not say goodbye now. We'll say goodbye at the end of the season. We'll have a chance, whether it's at Anfield or in another country, in another ground. And then he said, I mean, in another competition, not in another job. So obviously that the only thing that could refer to is the Europa League. They could win the quad this season. Like, I think he'll want to win the Europa League. It'd be the last game he'd play at Liverpool, that Europa League final. And if he's thinking of winning everything, Clive, then that's a lot of football that he's going to be prioritizing. They already went pretty strong even in their FA Cup tie. They're going to be stretching the squad to its limits over now in the end of May, you know?
Yeah, I just want to. I agree with you. I think I just want to say one other thing. I've been just sort of searching around Liverpool sort of sites and commentary, etc. And one thing I have learned about Klopp the last couple of days is he's very keen on leaving a strong legacy behind him. And we see a number of young players coming at Liverpool. And they've got the competition to do it, the FA Cup draws and Europa League draws to promote those young players. And I think I do admire him for doing that at a time when you could be seen to protecting your legacy by making sure you win everything with no risk. I think, unlike Fergie when he left an aged team for Manchester United and took the director of football with him and shot off into the moonlight and said, deal with that, all these aged contracts, and try to do what I did. And while he sat there, what's a stand named after him? I didn't agree with that. Klopp is trying to leave that club in a healthier place. They've got a number of young attackers, as you say. They've got a youth player in Kwanzaa, I think his name is, coming at centre back. It looks quite good. If you notice at the weekend, Elliot Robertson was on the bench, Trent was on the bench, just get themselves ready for next Sunday, right? So they got the rebuild in midfield that's been done. He won't see this come to fruition, but the team will be left in a better place for the next guy. So there's some pillars to deal with, absolutely, but there's a lot of icing sugar. Do you know what I'm saying? For that cake, already there, ready to go. And so if the right manager's selected, who brings his own style and brings his own people that he wants, there is something there to work with for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I just hope that they get it wrong. Tim, obviously, it adds a little spice to the game when they come to us. I think that the club that's got a bigger thing to worry about is Chelsea going to them. We've already covered that. I think for the season, we've already covered that. We've talked about the intermediate future. So let's just go a bit big picture here. Klopp, I think, is one of the best managers in the game. Look, I know that tribalism rules in football, and we're supposed to come on these podcasts and say everybody who's not Arsenal sucks and everybody who's Arsenal is great. I can't say that. I've enjoyed Klopp. I like the man from what I've seen, and I like the manager. I was one of those people who thought we should be trying to get him from Dortmund when his time had ended there. And I think had Wenger decided to go just a little earlier, that was definitely in the frame. I believe it. I believe it could have happened. Certainly, we got a couple FA Cups out of sticking with Arsenal. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with where we are now for sure. But for me, Tim, I think Klopp is the best or the second best manager in football. If you want to have Pep ahead of him, I think you have every right to. If you want to have Klopp ahead of Pep, I think you can make the argument. Now, some might say he's won one Premier League. What are you talking about? If you look at the point totals he's achieved, if you look at winning the Champions League, a Premier League title, 2 titles at Dortmund up against that Bayern team and making a Champions League final with them, he created a style that's become synonymous with him and been emulated. I think he and Pep have that in common, that they created the 2 sort of dominant styles of contemporary football. Not created, because I realized that there were guys that did it before them. Certainly Cruyff did it before Pep, and there were guys that did it before Klopp. But I mean, they became identified with the styles that became identified with contemporary football that were emulated by up-and-coming managers. Pep has done it at the clubs where winning is expected. Klopp has done it at clubs that have a wonderful history and tradition, but where I think winning had not been the tradition. I mean, he even brought Mainz up before Dortmund, and I don't think they'd ever been in the Bundesliga potentially before him. So ultimately, yeah, I think he's up there from a Premier League standpoint. the pantheon for me, in no order, is Ferguson, Wenger, Pep, Klopp, and then just outside of that tier for me is Jose Mourinho. But I think that's the pantheon. So before we get out of here, let's do a little historical analysis. What do you think? Where is Klopp in the pantheon from Premier League standpoint specifically?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned some of the teams he's successfully competed with, and there was a really nice phrase on Wrighty's House last week where I think Ian Wright said Klopp saved the Premier League in many ways, because without his Liverpool team, we'd be having a lot more serious conversations about the level of competitiveness.
It wouldn't even be the Bundesliga. It would be behind the Bundesliga and La Liga for competitiveness, genuinely.
Yeah, exactly. And even then, you're talking about City having won 5 of the last 6. And, maybe one day when he's in his rocking chair with his slippers, maybe he'll feel bitter about that. He'd be entitled to, I think, if he could look back and say, I can't believe I did all that and I only got 1 Premier League title because, someone else did things quite dubiously. And if you wanted to make the case that Klopp is better than Guardiola, that's the case you make, isn't it? It goes back to his very famous quote when he was at Borussia Dortmund, and he said, "We've got a bow and arrow, and if you aim it well, you can do a lot with a bow and arrow, but Bayern have got a bazooka." That's exactly the challenge he's had at Man City. At the same time, I think Klopp has been smart enough to pick his jobs well. And I think Dortmund clearly suited him. It suited him to take, I do think there's something in him competing with Bayern and Man City and having that slight underdog maybe, and having in Dortmund and Liverpool, really tapping into the whole city and the whole identity of the club as well as, and that's why he has the 4 you listed, and the reason you put Mourinho outside of that is because Mourinho doesn't really have that. Doesn't really Mourinho. His Wikipedia page looks good because he wins stuff, but there isn't a legacy there. Or maybe Chelsea fans would argue that. I don't know, but Klopp. And this is the thing that makes me wonder about Klopp, about whether we'll see him in club football again, because he strikes me as the guy that stays at your club for 9-10 years, builds it up. And is he going to do that again? Is he going to be able to find that again? Where would he go to find that? So maybe he will, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, like you said, just completely synonymous with a style. Has he irritated me at times? Of course he has. But I kind of think it's impossible to be an elite player or manager in the Premier League when you're in the Premier League and not be irritated by some people. Sometimes he's irritated me far less than other managers, put it that way. And I do think at the core of it, a good guy, and that Klopp and Liverpool was just one of those symbiotic relationships that just really worked. And you know what? The second he stepped into that club, you kind of knew it was going to work. You knew that was a perfect marriage. And yeah, I mean, I've got nothing but respect for him as a coach and as a person as well. But put it this way, the biggest compliment I can pay him is I'm very, very glad he's leaving, and that he said very publicly he's not going to manage another Premier League club.
Yeah, all agreed, all seconded. I mean, think about this for a minute. He has 3 of the top 6 Premier League point totals in history and has 1 title to show for it.
Can I tell you another stat? Because people often say that the league title he won is asterisk because of the COVID season, and it's completely unfair because they walked it. So here's a stat for you. If Liverpool hadn't played after football was shut down in March 2020, they'd abandoned all of their 11 remaining games. They still would have won the league.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Think about that. They had the league won before COVID stopped football. That's remarkable. 99 points, 97 points, 92 points, 1 title to show for it. And by the way, LOL, it doesn't pain me, but I think if you're evaluating Klopp, you can only evaluate him in that context, especially given that we use the same caveats to explain what we're dealing with trying to win titles against City. So yeah, you don't get to do it any other way. Let's
I have to drop.
Yep. Okay. Tim, just mute and turn off the camera, leave everything connected. Tim's on Twitter, Stillmanator. Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Getting ready to wrap it anyway here. Clive, let's get your thought on this, though. I certainly want to give you a shot at just putting the historical context to it. So when you think of that pantheon that I laid out of all-time greats, how do you have it? How do you think about it? Where's Klopp in that?
Yeah,
in that
I don't do ratings. I can't bother with
Even when I
that.
make you.
And so, yeah, one thing I will say, behind the smiley face and the very personable personality, there's actually a very good football watcher and football coach and understanding of players' talents there. And I don't think he gets enough credit for his coaching or his ability to hire good coaches and allow them to operate. I don't think he gets enough credit for his ability to see what's happening in game and change and adapt to that and change the story of a game. I think he's brilliant at that. I love the way he selects players. I'm someone that tends to like more physical, hard-running players. They fit my eye a bit better. So I like the way he controls the area of the pitch with a level of intensity, physicality, and talent. I don't always like his style of play. I think it's a bit up and at 'em. But so what? If everyone played the same, it would be really boring, wouldn't it? So I think some of that chaos, I think we've embraced in the last couple of games, actually, and I quite like it. Find that balance between what City and Liverpool do that we should be trying to do. So I definitely like his values. I like what he tries to be. I like his value structure and how he puts it over the club. And but it is interesting what's happening with him going and his backroom staff going at the same time. I find that really, really interesting. I still think there's more to come here on this story. Where he fits the English game, we will see. But I've got a lot more respect for him than I do have for Ferguson, for Mourinho. They don't compare at all in my mind about because of the way they operate, and how you operate is very important to me. So yeah, I'm a fan while being pleased that we are catching them. We're in a conversation with them, and I think we're about to overtake them in the medium near term. But hey, he won't be there to see that.
Yeah. 3 Champions League finals, 1 Champions League, 1 with Liverpool, a Champions League final with Dortmund as well, 2 titles for Dortmund, and 1 for Liverpool, with 3 of the top 6 point totals of all time, and a style of football that I think helped change the game. So to me, one of the best, and the kind of generational manager that when that person leaves, a club tends to go through a really difficult time. And we can only wish the most difficult of times on Liverpool in the future, because that just helps us. So we'll see what happens. I think there's a lot of Liverpool v Arsenal to be discussing in the next several days, but we've got to stay focused on Forest. And given how much we've talked about Liverpool in this pod alone and how little was dedicated to Forest, it gives you a sense of just where the brain could be, just where the mind can wander. And you have to hope that Arsenal do not have any mind wandering going on ahead of the trip to Forest. It is a tough game. Mikel should have no trouble getting them up for it, because he can point to how we've struggled against them. And I think the team would be well up for it, but it's still a difficult one. So we'll see what happens. And then, maybe we do the unthinkable and root for Chelsea. Look, I don't love it. I don't love it any more than you do, but football makes strange bedfellows, and that's where we're at. So Tim's already gone. Clive is not. So we'll say goodbye to Clive. He's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you at full time tomorrow on the Instant Reaction. Again, that'll be live streamed is the plan, and then out as a regular recording, so you can hear it however you want. My name is Elliot Smith, Black Man Twitter. Gunner, we love you. We'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, 4-0.